It was almost midnight when Ethan Wallace, one of the most well-known real estate developers in Manhattan, returned to his luxury townhouse earlier than expected. The dinner with investors at the plaza had ended abruptly after a heated argument over a contract. His colleagues stayed for drinks, but Ethan excused himself. He didn't feel like celebrating. The streets of Manhattan were unusually quiet. A light drizzle slicked the pavement, and by the time he parked in the garage, the city outside seemed like another world. Ethan stepped out of his black Mercedes, his tie loosened, his mind still circling around numbers, deals, and deadlines. He entered through the garage door, tossed his keys on the polished mahogany console, and instinctively slipped off his leather shoes. It was a habit he had picked up as a boy from his grandmother: never make unnecessary noise at night. Barefoot, he walked down the long corridor, past framed photographs of corporate events and magazine covers with his face plastered on them. To the outside world, Ethan was the picture of success, young, wealthy, and engaged to Madison Pierce, a socialite known more for her Instagram followers than her kindness. But inside, in that heavy silence, he felt strangely hollow. He entered the kitchen with the simple thought of pouring a glass of water. The motion-sensing lights blinked on, and the sudden brightness revealed something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Sitting on the tiled floor, her back against the wall, was Rosa Martinez, the housemaid. She was no older than 30. Her dark hair tied in a simple braid, her posture curled as though she wanted to disappear into the shadows. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her blouse wrinkled, her hands trembling around a chipped plate filled with leftover rice and beans. She wasn't using silverware, only a folded tortilla to scoop small bites of food. For a man who had seen boardrooms full of lies, this sight was the most unsettling thing he had witnessed in years. "Rosa?" Ethan's voice broke the silence. She startled, gasping as though someone had caught her stealing. The plate almost slipped from her hands. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide, filled with shame. "Mr. Wallace, I didn't know you were home." Her voice cracked as she wiped at her face with the sleeve of her apron. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean this up immediately." Ethan frowned, stepping closer, unable to hide his confusion. "Why are you sitting on the floor? Why are you crying?" She shook her head firmly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's nothing, just a headache. I didn't want to disturb anyone," but Ethan wasn't convinced. Rosa had worked for him nearly 2 years. In all that time, she had been steady, disciplined, and strong. He had never seen her falter, never heard her complain. To see her broken, eating like she wasn't even allowed to touch the furniture, unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. "Rosa," he said again, his voice softer, "tell me the truth. Did someone say something to you?" For a moment her whole body stiffened. She turned toward the sink, quickly rinsing her hands as though washing away her shame. "Please, sir, forget you saw me this way. It won't happen again." Ethan wanted to press further, but her guarded silence left him powerless. He grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and started to leave. Yet at the doorway he stopped, glancing back at her hunched figure. "If you ever need anything at all, you can come to me," he said, his tone low but firm. Rosa nodded quickly without looking up. Ethan climbed the staircase with a weight in his chest. He couldn't shake the image of her, alone on the kitchen floor, eating like she didn't deserve a chair in the house. She worked so hard to keep spotless. Upstairs, Madison's bedroom door was cracked open, warm light spilling into the hallway. Ethan entered. Madison lay sprawled on the bed in silk pajamas, her golden hair spread across the pillow, a phone in one hand and a half-empty wine glass on the nightstand. A tray with remnants of dinner sat on the table beside her. She glanced up with a smile that was practiced more than sincere. "You're home early." "How was dinner?" "Fine," Ethan replied flatly, loosening his tie. His eyes flicked toward the food tray. "Did Rosa bring you this?" "Yes, but it was cold," Madison answered with a dismissive laugh. "I had to tell her to heat it again. Honestly, she's so slow sometimes." "I don't know how she hasn't figured out simple things by now." Ethan's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but a spark of anger stirred in his chest. Madison continued, stretching languidly like a cat. "Anyway, we should talk about the engagement party. I want it at the Waldorf. My mother already called their planner." She smiled at him, expecting his approval, but Ethan wasn't listening. His mind was still downstairs, replaying the image of Rosa with red-rimmed eyes, holding a chipped plate, sitting on the floor like a stranger in her own life. Something about it cut deeper than he expected. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that wasn't just a headache. Someone had broken her spirit, and he had a terrifying suspicion of who. That night, while Madison scrolled endlessly through her phone, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, the silence of his luxurious home felt heavy, and the sound that haunted him most was not Madison's voice, not the rain tapping the windows, but the quiet, muffled sobs of the woman downstairs who believed she had no right to sit at a table. The following morning, the townhouse on East 74th Street woke to its usual routine, polished floors gleaming under the morning sun, the faint hum of the espresso machine in the kitchen, and Madison's voice echoing from her room as she spoke loudly on her phone. But to Ethan, nothing felt ordinary anymore. He had spent most of the night restless, haunted by the image of Rosa crouched on the kitchen floor with a plate of leftovers. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Rosa was already awake. Her eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, but her body moved with the discipline of habit. She tied her hair into a neat bun, buttoned her faded uniform blouse, and slipped quietly into the kitchen. She began preparing breakfast, scrambled eggs the way Ethan preferred, avocado toast for Madison, and fresh squeezed orange juice as she cracked eggs into the pan. Rosa's hands shook slightly, not from the burn of the oil splash from last night, but from the words that still echoed in her memory, words Madison had spat at her the day before. "You're just the help. Don't forget your place." Rosa bit her lip until she tasted blood. She had endured insults before, customers at diners when she worked double shifts, neighbors who whispered behind her back when her husband died. But somehow, Madison's words cut deeper. Maybe because Rosa lived under her roof. Maybe because Madison's voice was sharp, calculated, meant not just to remind her of her position, but to erase her dignity entirely. The sound of heels clicked against the stairs. Madison entered the kitchen wearing a silk robe, sunglasses perched on her head, though the morning light barely streamed in. She didn't look at Rosa when she spoke. "Is the juice fresh or from the fridge?" "Fresh, ma'am," Rosa replied softly. Madison sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone. "Good. I have a photo shoot today. I want a protein shake ready in 20 minutes. Don't mess it up this time," Rosa nodded. She placed a plate of avocado toast in front of her. Madison barely glanced at it. Minutes later, Ethan came down the stairs, dressed in a navy suit, his silver cufflinks gleaming. He paused when he saw Rosa. She looked exhausted, her shoulders hunched lower than usual. He greeted her gently. "Good morning, Rosa." "Good morning, sir," she replied, not meeting his gaze. Ethan sat at the dining table, his phone in hand, pretending to check emails. In truth, he was watching quietly. He noticed how Rosa's movements were careful, almost fearful, whenever Madison was in the room. He noticed how she served food without ever looking up, as if she wanted to be invisible. Madison, sipping her juice, suddenly frowned. "Rosa, did you iron my silk blouse for the shoot?" "Yes, ma'am. It's hanging in your dressing room. And my white heels. They better not have a single scuff." "They're polished, ma'am." Madison smirked without saying thank you. Ethan's jaw tightened again. He couldn't understand how someone could demand so much, yet give so little respect. When breakfast ended, Madison breezed out of the kitchen, leaving her half-eaten toast on the plate. Rosa moved to clear it, her hands careful not to make a sound. Ethan remained seated, watching. When Madison's footsteps faded upstairs, he finally spoke. "Rosa," he said, his tone low, almost hesitant. "About last night." Her body froze. She didn't turn around. "Please, sir." "I'd rather not talk about it." Ethan stood, crossing the room slowly. "But I need to understand. You were crying and eating on the floor. No one should—" He stopped himself, frustrated. "Tell me the truth." Did Madison say something to you? Rosa's shoulders stiffened. She shook her head quickly, still not facing him. No, sir. She didn't. It was just a long day. I was tired. That's all, Rosa, he pressed gently. I saw your face. That wasn't just tiredness. Finally she turned, and for a moment Ethan saw the pain flicker in her eyes before she quickly masked it. Please, if I tell you anything, it will only make things worse. For me, for my son. I can't risk that. Her voice broke on the last word, son. Ethan blinked. He knew Rosa had a child, but she rarely spoke of him. In all the months she had worked for him, she had kept her private life sealed, never once asking for pity or favors. Before he could respond, the sharp sound of Madison's heels returned. Rosa quickly dropped her gaze and moved to the sink, scrubbing dishes as though nothing had happened. Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself back into silence. Later that day, Rosa slipped out on her break to call her son. Matteo was 11, staying with Rosa's sister in a cramped apartment in Queens. His voice on the phone was thin, distant, but bright when he spoke of his drawings. Skyscrapers, bridges, parks, all sketched in a cheap notebook with dull pencils. Mama, I made a new design for a house. When you come, I'll show you. It has a big garden and a swing. Rosa pressed the phone tighter to her ear, her throat aching. That sounds wonderful, Carino. I'll come soon, I promise. You always say that, Matteo whispered, his voice suddenly fragile. But you never have time. Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced herself to stay steady. I'm working hard, so you'll have everything you need. Someday you'll understand. When the call ended, Rosa leaned against the cold wall of the pantry, her chest tight with guilt. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had walked into the kitchen just moments earlier. He had heard nothing of the conversation, but had seen her silhouette through the half-open door, clutching the phone, trembling. He didn't interrupt, but something inside him hardened. This wasn't just about last night. There was more beneath the surface. He needed to know the truth. That evening, Ethan's mother, Eleanor Wallace, arrived unexpectedly. A dignified woman in her 60s, she had sharp eyes that could read a person's soul in seconds. Ethan greeted her warmly, but when Eleanor stepped into the kitchen and saw Rosa serving tea, she paused. Is this the woman who takes care of your house? Eleanor asked. Yes, mother. This is Rosa. Eleanor studied Rosa quietly. Rosa bowed her head politely, murmuring, Good evening, Mrs. Wallace. Eleanor gave a small nod. You cook? Yes, ma'am. And you clean? Yes, ma'am. Eleanor's gaze softened just slightly. You must work very hard. This house doesn't shine on its own. Rosa flushed, not used to being acknowledged. Thank you, ma'am. Ethan watched silently. His mother's words were simple, but the gratitude in them was something Rosa rarely received. For a moment, he saw a faint smile flicker across Rosa's lips, fragile but real. That night, long after Madison had fallen asleep scrolling through social media, Ethan stood alone at the window of his study. The city glittered below, but his thoughts were far from the skyscrapers he built. They were with Rosa, the maid who ate scraps on the floor, the woman who worked herself to the bone for a child she barely saw, the soul who carried pain in silence. And for the first time, Ethan admitted to himself, what he had witnessed wasn't something he could ignore. The truth of this house was far darker than the polished image it showed the world, and soon it was going to crack open. The next few days unfolded like a theater play, where everyone knew their roles but pretended not to. Madison glided around the house like a queen in her palace, issuing commands with her manicured fingers and smiling only when the camera on her phone was pointed at her. Rosa continued her silent routine, scrubbing, cooking, polishing, always present yet invisible, her body moving as if fueled by duty alone. And Ethan, though outwardly calm, carried a storm inside him that grew heavier with each passing hour. On Wednesday evening, the storm nearly broke. Ethan had just returned from a long day of negotiations. He walked into the townhouse at dusk, exhausted, his shoulders tense. As he passed the living room, he heard Madison's voice raised in irritation. He stopped. Rosa, I told you to arrange the flowers in the crystal vase, not the ceramic one. Are you deaf? From the hallway, Ethan saw Rosa standing by the coffee table, her hands nervously clasped together, a vase of lilies trembling slightly in her grip. I thought the ceramic matched the curtains better. Ma'am, Rosa said softly. Madison scoffed. You thought? Since when do I pay you to think? Your job is to follow instructions, not decorate like you own the place. She stepped closer, snatching the vase from Rosa's hands so abruptly that water spilled onto the rug. Rosa flinched as Madison's eyes narrowed. Clean this up right now. And remember, your opinion means nothing here. Before Ethan realized it, his hand was on the doorway, his knuckles white. He wanted to storm in, to shout, to tear Madison's cruelty apart with his words. But he held himself back. Not yet. If he exploded now, Madison would twist it, call him dramatic, accuse Rosa of causing tension. He knew her too well. Instead, he walked away, but his jaw ached from clenching it so hard. Later that night, while Madison soaked in a bubble bath upstairs, Rosa was alone in the kitchen. She hummed softly, not a cheerful tune, but a faint melody from her childhood in Mexico, something her mother used to sing when times were hard. She had just finished wiping down the counters when Ethan entered, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. Rosa startled. Mr. Wallace, I didn't hear you come in. I'll get out of your way. Don't, Ethan said quickly. He leaned against the doorway, watching her. You don't always have to run. Rosa's hands froze on the rag. She lowered her gaze. It's safer this way. Ethan stepped closer, his voice gentler. Safer from what? From Madison. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She shook her head as if denying would erase the truth. Rosa, he said firmly, I've seen enough. I know she mistreats you. Her eyes flickered with panic. Please, don't say that. If she hears you, she'll fire me. I can't lose this job. My son, her voice broke, and she pressed her hand against her chest as if holding herself together. Ethan hesitated, then asked softly, What's his name? Mateo, she whispered. He's 11. He loves to draw. He wants to be an architect someday. A small, sad smile curved her lips. He says one day he'll design a house for me. A house where I can finally rest. Ethan's throat tightened. He pictured the boy he had never met, sketching buildings in a cheap notebook, while his mother worked herself to the bone for scraps of respect. Rosa, he said, his voice lower, you deserve more than this. You deserve dignity. Her eyes shimmered, but she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. Dignity doesn't pay the bills, Mr. Wallace. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and intimate. Then Ethan broke it. I want to meet him. Your son. Rosa's head snapped up. No, that's not... She shook her head firmly. It's not appropriate. I don't care about appropriate. I care about you. About him. I want to see the boy you've been fighting for all this time. Her lips trembled, caught between fear and gratitude. Why? She asked finally, her voice barely a whisper. Because... Ethan stopped, running a hand through his hair. He couldn't confess what he was truly feeling, not yet. Instead he said, because no one should fight alone. The opportunity came sooner than either of them expected. That Saturday, Ethan had planned a small gathering for his business associates in the townhouse garden. Madison had spent the entire week obsessed with floral arrangements, table settings, and the dress she would wear. Rosa worked tirelessly to prepare the menu, mini crab cakes, glazed salmon, fresh fruit platters, all under Madison's critical gaze. But in the middle of the chaos, Ethan quietly told Rosa, take Sunday afternoon off. Bring Mateo, I'd like to meet him. Rosa froze, her heart racing. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. Madison would never forgive her if she found out. But something in Ethan's tone, steady, sincere, unyielding, made her nod. Sunday arrived with a rare warmth in the spring air. Rosa traveled to Queens to pick up Mateo. The boy was thin but bright-eyed, his worn sneakers scuffed from playground dust, his small hands clutching a sketchbook filled with drawings. When they arrived at the townhouse, Ethan was waiting at the door. Dressed casually in jeans and a button-up shirt, he looked less like the intimidating tycoon Rosa knew, and more like "A man! You must be Matteo," Ethan said warmly, extending his hand. The boy hesitated, then shook it shyly. "Yes, sir." "No, sir," Ethan corrected with a smile. "Call me Ethan." For the first time, Rosa saw her son's face light up. He followed Ethan into the garden, where the sunlight spilled across the manicured lawn. They sat together at the patio table, while Ethan asked questions about his drawings. Matteo eagerly flipped open his sketchbook, showing bridges, houses, even a detailed park with fountains and benches. "These are incredible," Ethan said honestly. "You have real talent," Matteo's chest puffed with pride. "Someday I'll build a house for my mama, with a big garden and a swing." Rosa's throat closed. She looked away, blinking back tears. For over an hour, Ethan listened to Matteo's dreams, offering gentle encouragement. Rosa watched from the shade, her heart swelling with a bittersweet ache. For once, her son wasn't invisible. Someone powerful, someone who mattered, saw him. But upstairs, behind the balcony curtains, Madison stood silently, her eyes narrowed. She had returned early from her brunch with friends, and what she saw below tightened her chest with rage. Ethan smiling at the maid's child, Rosa glowing with quiet pride. Madison's hand clenched the curtain until her knuckles turned white. "This ends now," she whispered under her breath. That evening, after Rosa and Matteo left, the air in the townhouse was no longer peaceful. The silence felt charged, heavy, as though the walls themselves carried Madison's fury. Ethan sat in his study, staring at the sketches Matteo had forgotten on the table. He had promised to keep them safe until next time. The drawings, bridges arching across rivers, skyscrapers with precise lines, a modest home with a swing set in the yard, spoke louder than words. They weren't just doodles from a child. They were dreams stitched onto paper. He turned the pages slowly, his heart tightening. For years, Ethan had been surrounded by architects, contractors, and developers, but none of their visions had ever touched him like the simple pencil strokes of an 11-year-old boy who wanted nothing more than to build a home for his mother. Just then, Madison appeared in the doorway, her stilettos clicking on the hardwood floor. She crossed her arms, leaning against the frame with a smile that was anything but kind. "So," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "I see we've opened a little charity program for the help and her bastard child." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Don't talk about them like that. Why not?" Madison stepped inside, circling the study like a predator. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you looked out there, sitting with the maid's kid as if he belonged here? Do you want the neighbors to start talking? Or worse, the press? Do you want your investors to think you've lost your mind?" Ethan set the sketchbook down gently, but his jaw clenched. "He's a child, Madison. An innocent boy. If you had actually listened to him for 5 seconds, you would have seen how smart he is, how talented. He deserves encouragement, not contempt," Madison scoffed, tossing her hair. "You're defending them? Them? Ethan, she's your maid. She scrubs our floors, she cleans my shoes. That's her place. And you—" She jabbed a manicured finger at him. "You're letting her blur the lines." Something in Ethan snapped. He stood up, his tall frame towering over her. "The only one blurring lines here is you. I've watched how you treat her, Madison. The cruelty, the insults, the way you make her feel less than human. It disgusts me." For the first time, Madison faltered, her mouth parting in shock. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "I'm done pretending I don't see it. Rosa works harder than anyone in this house. She deserves respect. And Matteo, he deserves a future. If you can't see that, then maybe you don't belong here." Madison's face flushed crimson. She spun on her heel, slamming the door behind her as she stormed upstairs. Meanwhile, in the small apartment in Queens, Rosa sat at the kitchen table with Matteo. Her sister Marisol was bustling around, preparing tamales for dinner, but Rosa barely noticed. She kept replaying the afternoon in her mind. How Ethan had listened to Matteo, how he had encouraged him, how her son's eyes had sparkled with joy she hadn't seen in months. "Mama," Matteo said, tugging at her sleeve, "Mr. Ethan said he liked my drawings. Do you think I could really be an architect one day?" Rosa's throat tightened. She cupped his face with her bandaged hand, ignoring the sting. Of course, mi amor. You can be anything you dream. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. But Matteo's voice dropped. What if people laugh at me because I'm poor? Rosa's heart shattered. She pulled him into her arms, holding him close. Then let them laugh. You'll show them one day. You'll build something so beautiful, they'll wish they had believed in you sooner. Matteo nodded, his small arms clutching her tightly. Back in Manhattan, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of his townhouse, the echo of Madison's words still stinging in his ears. He stopped outside Rosa's small quarters, where she stayed on the nights Madison demanded extra work. The door was closed, but faintly he could hear her soft sobs. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it. He didn't want to frighten her, didn't want to intrude. But every fiber of his being wanted to tell her she wasn't alone anymore. Instead, he whispered to the silent hallway, I'll protect you, both of you, no matter what it costs me. The next morning, Madison awoke determined. If Ethan thought he could humiliate her by siding with the maid, she would remind him who truly controlled the narrative. She dressed in a tailored suit and called her mother, a woman with deep ties to New York's social elite. Mother, we need to accelerate the engagement party, she said coldly, and make it grand, bigger than anyone has seen. I need the press there. The Wallaces need to be reminded where their loyalties lie. Her mother, a sharp-tongued matriarch, agreed instantly. Plans began before sunrise. Venues, designers, publicists. Madison's weapon wasn't just her venomous words. It was her ability to wield society's gaze like a knife. By noon, invitations were already being drafted for an event at the Waldorf Astoria. Rosa learned about it the hard way. She was polishing the silverware when Madison swept into the kitchen, her heels striking the tiles like gunshots. Rosa, she said with a smile that was more like a threat, we're hosting an engagement gala in 2 weeks. Every influential name in New York will be there. That means this house needs to shine like never before. Floors, chandeliers, windows, everything spotless. And as for you, she leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. Stay invisible. I don't want you anywhere near the guests. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Rosa whispered, her stomach knotting. Madison smirked and left. Rosa stood frozen, the rag limp in her hands. A part of her wanted to scream, to throw the silverware back onto the counter, to quit and walk away forever. But then she thought of Matteo, of his hopeful eyes, of the swing he had drawn in his sketchbook. And so she swallowed her pride, like she always did. But deep inside, something new was forming, a quiet fire, a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She wouldn't be invisible forever. That night, Ethan received a call from his mother, Eleanor. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Ethan, she said, I know my son. Something is troubling you. Is it Madison? Ethan hesitated. He wanted to deny it, to pretend everything was fine. But then he remembered Rosa's tear-stained face, Matteo's fragile hope, Madison's venomous words. Yes, he admitted. It's Madison. I don't know how much longer I can do this. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Eleanor spoke, her words deliberate. Then don't. A man can lose money, Ethan. He can lose deals. But if he loses his soul, he loses everything. Ask yourself, are you living in a house or in a cage? Ethan's eyes burned as he stared out at the glittering skyline of Manhattan. For the first time he realized he didn't know the answer. And far away, as Rosa tucked Matteo into bed at Marisol's apartment, she whispered a prayer she hadn't dared speak in years. God, give me the strength to endure. And maybe, just maybe, give us a chance at something better. Neither she nor Ethan knew it yet, but their lives were on a collision course. And when the engagement gala came, every secret, every lie, every hidden cruelty would be dragged into the light. The days leading up to the engagement gala were unlike anything Rosa had experienced before. The townhouse, already pristine, was turned into something resembling a palace. Contractors came and went. Decorators draped the walls with fresh arrangements of lilies and roses. Crystal chandeliers were polished until they shimmered like diamonds, and imported carpets were unrolled across the marble floors. Madison, of course, orchestrated it all with the ruthlessness of a general preparing for battle. She walked from room to room, clipboard in hand, her voice sharp, commanding every detail. "No, the orchids go on the left. The champagne must be chilled exactly to 45 degrees. The ice sculpture should be taller. People need to feel small next to it." She barked at caterers, dismissed decorators, and belittled Rosa in front of anyone within earshot. And Rosa, she became the silent engine keeping it all together. She worked from dawn until midnight, scrubbing, arranging, carrying, often skipping meals just to keep up. She had endured Madison's cruelty before, but these days it grew more vicious, more deliberate. Every order came laced with venom, as if Madison was testing her limits. "Rosa, the silverware is crooked. Rosa, you ironed this napkin wrong. Rosa, don't stand there like a ghost. Move." Still, Rosa swallowed it all, not for Madison's sake, but for Matteo's. Every insult, every bruise in her heart she endured with one thought: my son needs me to keep this job. He needs me to be strong. One evening after the decorators left, Rosa stayed behind in the kitchen, polishing trays until her arms ached. She didn't hear Ethan enter until his voice startled her. "Rosa!" She dropped the cloth, quickly straightening. "Yes, Mr. Wallace?" "You've been working non-stop. When was the last time you ate?" His tone was firm but tinged with concern. She lowered her eyes. "I had some bread earlier. That was breakfast, wasn't it?" He pressed. Rosa hesitated. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ethan stepped closer, frustration clear in his face. "You can't keep doing this to yourself. You'll collapse." Her lips trembled, but she shook her head. "I don't have a choice. If I slow down, she'll what?" Ethan cut in. "Fire you? Belittle you? She already does." Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "If I lose this job, I lose everything. I can't afford to gamble with my son's future." The word son pierced the air again like a bell. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Matteo, you're carrying the world for him." Her voice broke. "He deserves better than this. I don't want him to grow up thinking his mother's worth is only in how well she scrubs floors." Ethan reached out, then hesitated, his hand lingering in the air before retreating. "Rosa, I swear one day soon I'll make sure you don't feel like this ever again." She shook her head quickly, stepping back. "Please don't promise me things you can't keep. I've learned not to hope too much. Hope can be dangerous." But even as she said it, Ethan could see it in her eyes. There was still a flicker, a fragile ember of hope that hadn't died yet. Meanwhile, Madison was making her own preparations. Every morning she met with stylists, tailors, and jewelers. She ordered a gown imported from Paris, dripping with sequins, and shoes that cost more than Rosa's entire monthly salary. She spent hours in front of mirrors rehearsing her smile, her laugh, the way she would hold Ethan's hand for the photographers. To Madison, the gala wasn't about celebrating love. It was about power. It was her chance to cement her status, to silence whispers, to remind the city's elite that she was untouchable. And if Rosa became collateral damage along the way, so be it. One afternoon, Madison's friend Charlotte stopped by, a fellow socialite with equally sharp claws. As they sipped champagne in the lounge, Madison leaned in, her eyes gleaming. "You should have seen him, Charlotte." Ethan sat in the garden with the maid's child, like some kind of father figure. "Can you imagine?" Charlotte laughed cruelly. "Maybe he feels sorry for them. Men get like that sometimes. But don't worry, you'll make sure she knows her place." Madison's smile was thin, venomous. "Oh, she'll know. At the gala, I'll make sure she never forgets who runs this house." Rosa, passing through with a tray of tea, heard every word. She kept her head down, but her heart pounded. The night before the gala, Rosa sneaked a call to Matteo. She sat on the edge of her small bed, clutching the phone. "Mama, are you coming tomorrow?" he asked eagerly. Her throat tightened. "I can't, Carino. I have to work late. But soon, I promise. Mr. Ethan said he wants to see my new drawings. Maybe I can come again?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Yes, mi amor, soon. Be good for your tia, okay?" She hung up quickly, not wanting him to hear her cry. The day of the gala dawned bright and cold. By noon, Trucks pulled up with crates of champagne, crystal glasses, towers of exotic fruits, and arrangements of orchids and roses so heavy that Rosa struggled to carry them alone. Madison stalked behind her, criticizing every move. By 5 o'clock, the house was transformed. Strings of lights glittered across the garden. Musicians tuned their violins. The staff, dressed in black uniforms, moved like shadows, unseen but essential. Rosa stood in the kitchen, her apron damp with sweat, her hands raw from work. She wasn't supposed to be seen tonight. Madison had made that clear, but fate had other plans. When the first guests arrived, politicians, CEOs, celebrities, flashbulbs lit up the front steps. Madison descended the grand staircase in her shimmering gown, Ethan by her side, his expression unreadable. From the kitchen doorway, Rosa watched in silence. She didn't belong in that glittering world, but somehow she felt the currents of the night pulling her closer, as though something was about to break. And she was right, because hidden among the glittering chandeliers and champagne glasses, secrets were waiting to spill. And when they did, no amount of wealth or status would shield Madison from the truth, not this time. The engagement gala at the Waldorf Astoria townhouse began as a spectacle of glamour. The chandeliers spilled golden light over polished marble floors, the air thick with the scent of orchids and the clink of champagne flutes. Waiters in crisp black suits moved like clockwork, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres to New York's most influential elite. Madison thrived in this environment. Wearing her sequined Parisian gown that shimmered under every flash of the paparazzi's cameras, she walked with Ethan on her arm as if they were royalty. Every smile was rehearsed, every laugh timed, every gesture calculated. She greeted senators, CEOs, and fashion editors with a voice dipped in honey, masking the steel underneath. But Ethan, his face was unreadable. He spoke politely, nodded when necessary, but his thoughts weren't here among the glittering guests. They were elsewhere, on a boy with a sketchbook, and on the boy's mother who, at this very moment, was hidden in the back corridors of the hotel, carrying trays, unseen and unacknowledged, because Madison had insisted, "Rosa works tonight, but invisible. I don't want her anywhere near the spotlight." Rosa had tried to stay out of sight, moving between the kitchen and the service hallway with trays of food. The other staff noticed how pale she looked, how exhausted, but she kept her head down. Every time she passed the glittering ballroom, her chest tightened. She had never been in such a place of wealth, yet she was only here to serve, never to belong. At one point, she paused in the shadows, watching Ethan from a distance. He stood tall, handsome, yet distant, as though the world around him was made of glass. Rosa saw the loneliness in his eyes, even as Madison clung to his arm. And she wondered, not for the first time, what kind of man he truly was beneath the layers of money and duty. "Rosa," snapped a voice behind her. It was Madison. She had caught her looking. Rosa jerked back, her face flushing. "Yes, ma'am? Don't stand there gawking like a lost child. Go back to the kitchen. Now." Rosa nodded quickly, retreating before Madison could say more, but Madison wasn't finished. She turned back to the ballroom with a smirk curling her lips. "Tonight," she thought, "I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who's in charge. Ethan, the staff, the whole damn city." An hour into the gala, Madison made her move. The ballroom was buzzing with laughter, champagne, and string music. She clinked her glass for attention, her smile blinding under the chandeliers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice smooth and commanding, "thank you for being here tonight to celebrate our engagement. Ethan and I are honored to be surrounded by such distinguished friends." Polite applause filled the room. Ethan forced a small smile. Though it didn't reach his eyes, Madison continued, her tone playful but sharp. "Of course, a night like this wouldn't be possible without the help of those who keep our lives running smoothly behind the scenes. I'm talking about the staff, the invisible hands." There was polite laughter. Madison gestured toward the back of the room. "Why don't we show them our gratitude?" The staff froze. No one had expected this. One by one, waiters and maids were ushered forward by Madison's command. They stood awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom, uncomfortable under the spotlight, and then Madison's eyes locked on Rosa. "You too, Rosa," she said sweetly, venom laced in every word. "Don't be shy. Come here." The room fell into a hush as Rosa stepped slowly forward, her face pale, her hands clutching the edges of her apron. She felt hundreds of eyes on her, powerful men and women who never noticed her existence until now. Madison smiled coldly. "This is Rosa, our housemaid. She's very hard-working, sometimes too hard-working. Why, just last week she nearly burned her hand trying to cook. Imagine, ladies, how clumsy." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Rosa's cheeks burned with shame. She kept her eyes down, praying for it to end, but Madison wasn't done. "And you know what's most admirable? She does all this while raising a son on her own. Isn't that right, Rosa?" Rosa's chest tightened. She hadn't told anyone here about Mateo. How did Madison— "Yes," Madison continued, her voice ringing over the murmurs. "She has a little boy in Queens. Dreams of becoming an architect, I believe." Madison smirked. "Well, we can all dream, can't we?" The crowd chuckled politely. To them it was just banter, a small joke. But to Rosa it was a knife. She wanted to disappear into the floor, to run and never return. And then Ethan's voice cut through the room. "Enough." The laughter died instantly. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze locked on Madison. His voice was steady, but his anger vibrated beneath every syllable. "That's not funny." Madison blinked, caught off guard. "Ethan, I was just—" "No," he interrupted sharply. "You weren't. You were humiliating her. A woman who works harder than anyone else in this house. A woman who deserves respect." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged glances. Others sipped their champagne, intrigued by the drama unfolding before them. Madison's smile faltered. "Darling, you're making a scene." "Then let it be a scene," Ethan said, his voice rising. "Because I won't stand by while you treat Rosa like she's beneath you." "Not anymore," gasps echoed across the ballroom. Rosa froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never heard anyone defend her like that, certainly not in front of 100 powerful strangers. Madison's face flushed with rage. "You're humiliating me." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You've done that to yourself." For a long, charged moment, the room was silent. Madison's lips trembled, her hands shaking as she tried to regain control. But Ethan turned his back on her and walked toward Rosa. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his eyes meeting hers with quiet strength. "You don't have to be invisible anymore." Rosa's throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. And though the ballroom buzzed with whispers, though Madison's fury crackled like a storm, one truth had already been laid bare. The cage was breaking, and once it shattered, nothing would ever be the same again. The gala had ended in chaos. What was meant to be Madison's grand coronation into the upper tier of New York society had unraveled before her very eyes. Guests left whispering, some wide-eyed with fascination, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The headlines the next morning were merciless. Waldorf engagement gala turned scandalous. Wallace heir defends Maid. Humiliates fiancé in front of elite. Social media was ablaze with videos captured on discreet phones. Millions had already watched the clip of Ethan stepping forward, voice steady and strong, telling Madison, "You were humiliating her. A woman who deserves respect." For Madison, it was an unthinkable humiliation. For Ethan, it was liberation. For Rosa, it was the first time in years someone had shielded her from cruelty rather than adding to it. But the storm was far from over. That night back in the townhouse, Madison's rage boiled over like fire. She stormed through the hall, tearing off her glittering earrings, her gown rustling like a storm cloud around her. Ethan followed slowly, calm but unyielding, while Rosa lingered in the shadows of the kitchen, too frightened to leave, yet too shaken to stay. "You ruined me." Madison screamed, her voice echoing against the high ceilings. "Do you even understand what you've done? Every society page, every blog, every whisper, they're all laughing at me." "They're not laughing at you," Ethan replied, his voice low. And they're seeing you for who you are. Madison spun, her eyes wild. And you, defending her in front of them? Have you lost your mind? She's a maid, Ethan. A servant. She's nothing. She's more human than you've ever been, Ethan said, his words sharp as glass. Madison's face twisted. For a moment, her fury was so raw, Ethan almost thought she'd strike him. But instead she hissed, "If you walk away from me for her, I'll destroy you both. Do you hear me? I'll destroy her, her son, everything she loves." The threat hung heavy in the air. Ethan's fists clenched, but his voice stayed steady. "You already lost, Madison. The only one destroying anything here is you." He walked away, leaving her trembling in her own rage. Rosa, who had overheard more than she should have, stood frozen, her hands pressed to her chest. Her heart thundered with both fear and something else, a dawning realization that Ethan had chosen to stand on her side, no matter the cost. The next morning, Townhouse woke to tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Madison had locked herself in her room, making frantic calls to her mother, to publicists, to anyone who might salvage her reputation. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in his study, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the morning paper. The photograph on the front page showed him standing beside Rosa, his hand on her shoulder. His eyes burned with conviction. Rosa's head was lowered, but her tear-stained face was visible. It was no longer just gossip. It was a story that had pierced the city's consciousness. Rosa arrived quietly, as always, her uniform neat, though her hands still bore raw cracks from endless work. She kept her head down, bracing herself. Surely this scandal would cost her everything, but Ethan surprised her. "Rosa," he said softly, gesturing for her to sit. She froze. "Sir, please," he urged. "Sit." Hesitantly she obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather chair across from him. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said. "Last night you were humiliated, and it was my fault for letting it go on this long. Madison, she's cruel. I should have stopped her years ago. But I didn't, and you paid the price." Rosa's eyes filled, but she shook her head. "You don't have to apologize to me. This is not your burden." "Yes, it is," Ethan insisted. "Because whether you believe it or not, you matter to me. And so does your son." Her breath caught. She looked away, whispering, "Please don't say that. Don't give me dreams I can't afford." "Rosa," Ethan said firmly, leaning forward, "I'm not giving you dreams. I'm giving you truth. You've carried yourself with strength no one in this house deserves. You've raised a boy with hope in a world that tries to crush it. That matters more than all the money, all the parties, all the empty smiles I've surrounded myself with." Tears spilled silently down Rosa's cheeks. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But fear held her heart in chains. "What will happen now?" she whispered. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Now, we face whatever comes. Together." Madison's retaliation by afternoon, Madison had launched her counterattack. She called a press conference at her mother's Fifth Avenue apartment, painting herself as the victim of Ethan's sudden betrayal. She claimed Rosa had manipulated him, that the maid had preyed on Ethan's kind heart for her own advantage. "She's been playing this role for years," Madison told the cameras, tears glittering in her eyes, always pretending to be meek, innocent. But behind the scenes, she was scheming. "My engagement was sabotaged by a servant who knew exactly what she was doing." The story spread fast. Comment sections exploded. Some believed Madison, painting Rosa as a manipulative gold digger. Others defended her, calling Madison's words cruel and classist. Rosa, reading the headlines in the servants' quarters, felt her world tilt. She had endured humiliation before, but this, being called a liar, a schemer, a thief of reputations, was unbearable. "I should leave," she told Ethan later, her voice trembling. "She's turning everyone against me. Against Matteo. I can't let him suffer because of me." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, if you run now, she wins. Rosa, I swear I will not let her destroy you. Or Matteo." A flicker of light. That weekend, Ethan drove Rosa to Queens to see Matteo. The boy ran to his mother, clutching his sketchbook, but then stopped short when he saw Ethan beside her. "Is he in trouble?" Matteo asked nervously. Ethan knelt down, looking the boy in the eye. No, Matteo, not trouble. I came because I wanted to see you, to see your drawings. Matteo's face lit up instantly. He opened his notebook, flipping to a new design, a tall, elegant building with glass windows that caught the sun. This one's for you, Mr. Ethan. It's a building that touches the sky. Ethan studied it carefully. You have a gift, Matteo. One day you'll build things even taller than this. And when you do, I'll be there, cheering for you. Rosa stood behind them, her hands pressed over her heart, watching her son smile in a way he hadn't in months. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival, but about living. The storm still loomed. But back in Manhattan, Madison was far from finished. She had powerful allies, her mother's influence in society, her father's connections in politics, her own cunning. She wasn't just planning to reclaim her reputation. She wanted revenge. Late at night, as the city glittered beyond her balcony, she whispered into her phone to a shadowy contact. I don't care how you do it, she said coldly. And find everything you can about Rosa Martinez. Her past, her family, her son. Anything I can use to destroy her. If Ethan thinks he can humiliate me, I'll make sure his precious maid regrets ever setting foot in this city. Her voice was like ice. And with those words, the battle lines were drawn. Ethan and Rosa had found a fragile thread of hope. Madison had sworn vengeance, and soon the storm would break in ways none of them could control. The city didn't sleep, but Rosa did not close her eyes that night. She sat by the window of her tiny room in Queens, the faint hum of traffic outside mixing with the restless pounding of her heart. Matteo was asleep in the next room, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. Ethan had dropped them off earlier, promising to call the next day. But Rosa could not quiet the storm within her because she knew Madison Pierce was not a woman who accepted defeat. She had money, power, and a venomous pride that burned hotter than fire. And now that Ethan had humiliated her before the entire elite of New York, Madison would stop at nothing. Rosa prayed quietly, clutching the small cross her late husband had given her years ago. Dios mío, protect my son, she whispered. Give me strength. Madison's schemes. Begin in her penthouse on Fifth Avenue, Madison sat at a glass desk lit by the city skyline. Around her were stacks of documents, photographs, and an open laptop glowing with news articles. She had spent the entire night speaking to private investigators her mother had hired. One man, bald, with a raspy voice, stood in the shadows of her living room. We've dug into Rosa Martinez's past, he said. She came here from Mexico after her husband died in an accident. But there are irregularities. Madison's eyes narrowed. Irregularities? She worked as a waitress under the table for years. No green card at the time, struggled with debts. There was even a landlord who claimed she missed months of rent. If we push the right buttons, we can make her look unstable, desperate, the perfect gold digger. Madison smiled coldly, her reflection glittering in the window. Perfect. Feed it to the press, slowly. Let the world see the tragic Maid as the scheming liar she really is. And the boy? The investigator asked. Madison's smile faltered into something darker. Ah, the son, Matteo. She leaned forward. Dig into his schooling. His guardians? I want whispers. Is he really her son? Did she have him out of wedlock? People love scandals about illegitimacy. Make them question her virtue. The man nodded and slipped out, leaving Madison alone with her hatred. She sipped her wine, picturing Rosa's face crumbling under the weight of disgrace. No one steals my place, she muttered. No one. Ethan learns the news. The following morning, Ethan sat in his office at Wallace Enterprises, scrolling through financial reports, when his assistant burst in with a tablet. Sir, you should see this. On the screen was a headline from a gossip blog. The truth about Ethan Wallace's Maid, a past full of secrets. Ethan's stomach dropped. He skimmed the article. It painted Rosa as an immigrant who manipulated her way into his house, using her son to gain sympathy. The article ended with a pointed suggestion. Is this the woman who has bewitched one of New York's wealthiest heirs? Society wonders, how long before she claims a piece of his fortune? Ethan slammed the tablet shut, anger flashing through him. He knew exactly where this had come from. Madison. Without hesitation, he called Rosa. She answered on the second ring, her voice already trembling. "Mr. Wallace, you've seen it, haven't you?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Don't read it again. Don't believe a word of it. This is Madison's work, but people will believe her," Rosa whispered. "She's powerful. She has friends in every corner of this city. If she destroys my name, what will happen to Matteo, to me?" Ethan's voice softened. "Look at me, Rosa. Listen to me. I won't let her touch you. Or Matteo. Whatever storm she brings, I'll stand in front of it." But Rosa's voice cracked with fear. "You don't understand. You have money, protection. I have nothing. Nothing but my son. You have me," Ethan said quietly. The line went silent. Rosa pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. A visit to Queens. That evening, Ethan drove unannounced to Queens. Rosa opened the door, startled, still in her apron from cooking dinner. Matteo peeked from behind her, eyes wide with curiosity. "I shouldn't have come," Ethan said softly, "but I couldn't sit in that office while lies about you spread." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "It's too dangerous, Ethan. If Madison finds out you came here—" "She already knows," Ethan interrupted. "She knows everything. And she'll know this too. I'm not afraid of her." Matteo tugged at his sleeve shyly. "Do you want to see my new drawing?" Ethan knelt down with a tired smile. "More than anything." The boy flipped open his sketchbook to reveal a design of a tall tower. But this one had something new. A garden on the roof with benches, flowers, and even a small swing. "This is for Mama," Matteo said proudly. "So she doesn't have to work so hard. She can sit in the garden and rest." Rosa covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Ethan looked up at her, his chest aching. This is what she fights for, he thought. This boy. This dream. He placed a hand on Matteo's shoulder. "One day you'll build this, and I'll help you." Madison strikes again, but while Ethan found a moment of peace in Queens, Madison sharpened her next blade. 2 days later, another article appeared. Illegal past. Rosa Martinez, under investigation, could face deportation. Though unconfirmed, the rumor spread like wildfire. Talk shows debated it, tabloids printed it, and Madison herself gave coy interviews saying, "I only hope Mr. Wallace isn't being manipulated." Rosa's world collapsed. She received stares on the subway, whispers at the grocery store. Even the other maids at the hotel whispered behind her back. One evening as she left work, a man sneered, "Gold digger!" under his breath. That night Rosa broke. She sat on her bed, clutching Matteo as he slept, rocking him gently while tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, mi amor, I tried. I tried so hard." She didn't hear the knock at her door until it came again, firmer. She opened it to find Ethan, his face hard with determination. "Pack your things," he said. Rosa blinked. "What? You and Matteo? Tonight. You're coming with me." Her heart raced. "Ethan, I can't." "You can," he insisted. "You're not safe here. Madison is tightening the noose, and I won't let her. From now on, you stay under my roof with my protection." Rosa's breath caught. She looked back at her sleeping son, then at Ethan. Her whole body trembled with fear, but in his eyes she saw something unshakable, something fierce. "Please," Ethan whispered. "Trust me." And for the first time, Rosa nodded. The turning point. By midnight, Rosa and Matteo were in Ethan's townhouse, not as invisible staff, but as guests. Ethan showed Matteo to a guest room, stocked with fresh sheets and a desk for drawing. Rosa stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. "This isn't right," she whispered. "I don't belong here." Ethan stepped closer. "Yes, you do. You've always belonged here. You just didn't believe it." Rosa's lips trembled. "And Madison?" Ethan's jaw hardened. "Let her come. Let her scream. Let her throw every lie she has. I don't care. Because from tonight on, you're not standing alone anymore." Rosa closed her eyes, tears spilling freely. For years, she had carried the world alone. But tonight, for the first time, she felt a hand steadying her, holding her up against the storm, and though the night outside was filled with whispers and flashing headlines, inside the townhouse, a new chapter had begun, one that no amount of Madison's hatred could erase. But Madison wasn't done yet. She had money, power, and a wounded pride, and she would rather burn everything to the ground than let Rosa rise. The war for truth had only just begun.